Hey everybody, what's up in the internets? My name is Shawn Taylor. You may know me from the Nerds of Color, New York Times, Ebony Magazine, coming to your grandma's house eating some chicken. I'm here with the illustrious Danielle José Older, the author of the new novel Shadowshaper, Half-Ressurection Blues, Long Hidden, and the heavyweight champion of the internet clapback. Welcome, brother. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited about Shadowshaper and all kinds of good shit. And it's great to talk to you, man. We've been like e-buddies for a minute, but we've never actually had a conversation. So it's good to chat.
It is. Man. Thank you, brother. Thank you. I mean, you know, I know you've been on tours, you've been on book readings, you've been doing workshops, and so I really don't want to just basically turn this into a job interview or a date and ask you a litany of just shit questions that you already answered 1,000 times before.
That's all right. You can do that.
But I mean, just real quick though, I like to ask everybody I interview this same question. 3 desert island books, 3 desert island albums, but you can't pick from people, but you can't pick like the Octavia Butlers, Tenerife Dewey's, you know, John Santos. You can't pick those. So 3 albums, 3 books, desert island. Hit me.
What is wrong with you, man? What kind of a Jesus. All right. Oh shit. Why do you do this to me right off the bat? James Baldwin's collected essays.
Okay.
You know, Jesus. Let me see. I would do Bullfinch's mythology, maybe a big collection of mythology.
Okay.
And can I just bring my Kindle? Like
all the world in my pocket.
You said I can't say Octavia?
No, because that's the go-to. That's kind of like what do you want to breathe? Oxygen, you know? I mean, it's like
shit, I'm blanking. Ooh. All right. Man, I gotta come back to it.
Come back around to that one.
Yeah. Yes, but I hate you.
Another interesting question though, I mean, like, what is it about this stuff? Because I mean, everybody, you know, wants to categorize it. You know, we talk about urban fantasy, we talk about the supernatural fantasy, we talk about, you know, but my question, I mean, outside of the taxonomy of genre convention, trying to like label everything, why this stuff? You know, like just how you write. I mean, I can see it. I mean, you're brilliant at essays. I mean, but why this stuff? Why, like, I mean, I guess we'll call it like, you know, like, I don't know, Latino noir, like, you know, spooky noir, whatever it is, like Fantasma noir, whatever it is. It's like, why this shit?
I mean, I think the simplest answer is because it's true, in the sense of like, when I walk down the street, this is what I see and know. And that's a combination of having been a paramedic for 10 years, you know, dealing with literally the line of life and death all over the city. And like literally being up in the back alleys of it and down the highways and byways of it and all these other things, you know, dealing with life and death and what does that mean? And people that are like on the way in between those two things and like being an active participant in that existence. Because, you know, when you're a medic, you're not just watching shit happen, you're really a part of shit. And that's part of the glory of that job and the difficult part. But so it's being a santero and being very conscious of spirituality and like what, you know, forms of spirit are around us and energies and all those different things. And it's also just having been an organizer and still organizing and of history. Like, to me, like the ghost story is the ultimate embodiment of like history walking with us, which is, you know, a very like social justice organizing principle is that, you know, we always carry our history with us. Certainly, like people have said it over and over in a million different ways, but it's there and it's so very present in Brooklyn. You know, you can't get away from it. It's true everywhere, but I feel like in certain cities like Brooklyn, New Orleans, you know, like you can really feel it and taste it in the air. And they're also like, they're very aware of it. And there's a conflict ongoing between the past and the present. When you think about gentrification, you know, you think about like all these different things that are happening very in the now, like right now, and they're very live and very raw and very dangerous. And very not spoken of that much in literature, particularly in sci-fi and fantasy. So I'm like, to me, it's like that's a huge vacancy that needs to be filled, because we're supposed to be talking about cities, but we're sort of making up either these like vast hellscapes or these happy, treacly little wonderlands, and neither one is true. Both are actually a lie, I would say, because that's not all there is. Of course, there's hell and there's heaven in the city, but if that's all you're showing us, you're lying to us. And so I just feel like I believe in telling the truth, and I love fantasy. I grew up reading it, and I love the movies and the books and everything else. And so it all just kind of comes together, like what I guess when you put all those pieces together, it's like, of course I write the shit I write. You know what I mean?
I know, I get it. Like, I mean, I'm more of a critic and more of a commentator. I've been really working, literally, I have a 300-page Bible of a book. I just can't get the fiction out. Because every time I try to write fiction, it's like, oh, I gotta write this essay. Oh, I gotta make sure I talk about parenthood. Oh, I'm Jamaican and Puerto Rican. I'm always Filipino and Black. I gotta write about that shit because that shit's important right now. And everything takes precedent. And I'm looking at this Bible like, I hope your mama gets hit by a bus. Like, that's why I'm looking at this Bible like mad as hell right now.
I understand, because when an essay comes, it's like it has to get out. I mean, that's true of books too. But you know what? It's like, it's like a beast trying to come out, and like I get annoyed sometimes because I'm really on this planet, I feel, to write, fiction. That's my first language. And then, but I get angry and upset about stuff, and then sometimes I just find things to be whimsical and beautiful, and I want to write about it in nonfiction. And then it's like, all right, hold on, everything got to stop. Sit down, write that damn essay, figure out where to send it, promote it, and I do love writing essays, and I love that I am able to write essays. I don't take that for granted, because I know some people just don't like or can't, really deal with nonfiction or with fiction or whatever. So, I'm happy to be ambidextrous in that sense. But it also can drive me wild sometimes, because I'm like, but this, but that. Oh, but I accept it.
I want to write about the dragon, but I got to write about the damn, the cop encounter I just had, I mean, so you said something that was really powerful.
Dragon having
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying you could write about a cop. That's kind of where I land. Is like I do try to bring in the ideas. Like I was thinking about it recently, especially with Shadowshaper about to come out. Like when I look back on all the essays that I've put out over the past year and a half or so, and like I feel like that was a lot of me like trying to articulate the analytical and theoretical framework and emotional framework behind Shadowshaper, which I had already done kind of in fiction. And then I was like, but I want to say it just outright. Whether it's about the importance of having people of color in literature, or dealing really upfront with racism and sexism, or what have you, or racism in the Latino community. Like all those pieces that I've been putting out really do speak to like stuff that I put into this book. And I almost feel like it was kind of like trying to clear the way, clear some of the shit out of the way, so that when Shadowshaper showed up, there would be it would be a welcoming world for it, like in a certain weird kind of way, I guess.
No, I get it. It's kind of like, it's almost like a fist fight. Let me throw all these volleys first, and then I'm gonna hit you with a knockout punch when I exhausted you.
Right.
Like, in your face, son. And I get that. I mean, but you said something really earlier that really intrigued me. Like, so what happens when our ancestors get gentrified away from us? Like, what happens when the bricks that your grandmother laid herself in the garden is now a fucking dog leash store?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, man, that's deep. That's heavy. I mean, that's where the street art piece really speaks to the whole situation, because like I remember seeing actually like there was a mural, I don't know if it's still there, but overall in like Clinton Hill area, like on Myrtle. And I was working on an ambulance that would sit right there. And there was a mural for, some cat that died, and they had painted him really, larger than life on that wall. And some asshole bought the building and put a fence that landed like right there on his face. I know, right? It's like you're viscerally just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Now, where to begin, right? I mean, one piece is that, I said this on that guest blog the other day at Diversity in YA, like this is really a time where, you know, place matters and race, of course, always matters, and all these things. And like, you know, like it really is to remember, it really has become an act of resistance, and to do it in an artistic way and a loud way, even more so, because we're supposed to forget. Like, we're supposed to forget where we come from. We're supposed to forget who our people are and were and why we're here. And I include in that we ourselves as people of color have histories of, you know, violence that we've committed against ourselves and all these different complicated things. You know, we're supposed to simplify and forget. And that is so dangerous, you know. So when people are painting murals, I don't know if they're actively, you know, it doesn't really matter if they're actively thinking of it as like, I'm here to resist something and you know, stake out this space where the people that I cared about who are gone, and no one else is going to remember, will never have their obituary in the New York Times or anywhere else, or, you know, have tributes on any TV station. Like, you're going to see that face on the wall. That's a powerful thing. The other piece of it, I think, that is, if we're going to go deep, you know, gentrification, it's a systemic and very long-term problem. And whenever you talk about it, people get really offended, like you're talking about white people. Get really offended, like you're talking about, you know, them specifically. And sometimes we are, but really, like, you know, that piece I put up on Salon about gentrification is a very systemic piece. It's an analysis of power and history. And you still had people on Facebook being like, why would you say that about me? You know, like freaking out, losing their mind. And like, it's not like, you know, it's not about them. It's about a system that they bring with it. And I would say even that we bring with it, because as I've said in the piece, you know, as a non-Black person of color with middle class and education privileges, like, you know, like you can't not bring that with you. That I look palatable, you know, to the white imagination. So I contribute to that whole cycle by moving here, and that's fucked up. You know what I mean? And it's like, me not moving here, it doesn't change it either. So it's like, you know, it's so dynamic and complicated and deep, and there is no winning necessarily, but you still have to talk about it. I don't want to say there's no winning, but it's not as simple as like do or don't or whatever. But if you're gonna be here, don't fucking put up a fence on a dead man's face.
I mean, like, yeah, and I also think that gentrification gets simplified to more than, you know, just like, you know, who has what space and who can do what. But I think you know, I don't care what color you are, you moving in next to me, just don't think your story that you're inserting is more important than the story that already exists. Yeah, I think that's the part I think that we really confuse. It's like, we can live together, whomever, however, but when you come in and saying, hey, my from Connecticut story is more important than your Jamaican immigrant story in Fort Greene, then that's where I think where the problems really, really kind of
it's that, but I wanna say that it's more than that too, because the dude from Connecticut brings with him all the things that happen when a white person moves in. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I agree. Like, I personally am like fine with living next to different types of people, but it doesn't matter what I feel like or they feel like. They can move in and be totally against it, or I can move in and be totally against it. The systems are still turning and making that happen. You know what I mean? Like, and part of that is because people move in. So it's like, and that's the deep thing I think about privilege, is like, there is this whole armory that's like ready to, you know, just jump into war, whether or not you want it to, you know, like as men, like we, you know, carry all these things with us that have meaning and history beyond what we want to be or do, that happen like when we enter a space. You know what I mean? Like, I walk into a room full of women and there's meaning behind my entrance, regardless of how nice a dude I am. You know what I'm saying? And that means that I have to be conscious and aware of that. Not like I have to, let me feel guilty or let me be angry about it. No, it's not about all that. It's like, know that fact about yourself, because it matters. When you walk into a room, you change a space, period. And the same is true for whiteness. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, I think there's something about that. I mean, even also too, I think that when we just enter space, even if no one's there, right. we're even changed by space. I mean, because if you think about like, you know, Diaspora talking about, you know, psychogeography, right? Like, we are affected by our physical environments. You know, churches are built to make us feel small. You walk in, vaulted ceiling, like, damn, I'm tiny in God's presence. You know, right. The biggest, you know, before back in the day, the biggest building in the neighborhood was the church. Then it right. was the law, you know, then it was like the courts or whatever. Right. So in your novels and your short stories, you have a real sense of almost like a a spiritual cartography that's going on in there. And I'm a really big, I mean, like some of my academic scholarship has been about people in place. Like, you know, so I'm really fascinated by how you take the level of, like, so say, for example, Half-Ressurection Blues, you know, you have, you know, at the end, there's, I don't want to, well, spoiler alert, motherfuckers, you should have read all that shit already. So, so at the end of the book, you know, there's the ritual is happening, and the woman, you know, the old woman, the old spirit, you know, so we have the spiritual metropolis laid over the regular metropolis, but they're actually interacting in a way that isn't counter to either of them. It's actually a symbiotic relationship that this shit is scary, and I wonder about you sometimes because this shit freaked me out lightweight. But there's something about that. So like how important is it for you to understand that, like, that there's two separate metropolises that we exist in? Right. If that makes any sense at all.
It does. It does. I love that question. I don't know how to answer it, but it's a great question. So deep, but it's like, you know, I mean, first of all, that I think that idea also speaks to all these different kind of metaphors that we're constantly playing with about, you know, even look at Bill de Blasio's whole campaign, which, you know, swept him into office, was Tale of Two Cities concept. You know what I mean? Like, and that's so real. Like literally in Brooklyn, not to constantly talk about gentrification, but just the way that it's laid out, even before things got like they are now, is like you could turn a corner and be in a fancy neighborhood and turn another corner and be, you know, in the hood. And that's just like, there are two cities overlapping each other constantly. Not to mention, you know, the subway and there's all these different, the way it's built on top of it. It's fascinating. You know what I mean? And then again, in history, it's like ghosts are everywhere. You know, I always say, like, you can also walk down a street named after a plantation owner and turn a corner and be on an abolitionist street, you know, or be on like Malcolm X Boulevard. You know what I mean? Like, they're all right there pushed up against each other. And that shit is deep. And I think sometimes we ignore that, you know, and while we're doing it, we're walking past, like, you know, memorial murals or the bottles laid out on the, you know, with flowers and all those things that happen, you know, to remember people. So there's that level of it. I think on a spiritual level, it is just this idea that there are, yes, spiritually, like there are things going on around us that we don't have a vocabulary for, let alone an ability to really envision, unless we put our minds to it. Whether that be, you know, Orisha or Jesus Christ, you know, there is, and I think sometimes it's easy for us to other it to an extreme extent, like heaven and earth, you know what I mean? But like my understanding of spirituality, and this is mine, is that it's all around us, and I think this is very a common, you know, philosophy, is that regardless of religion, is that God works through us, you know, or whatever energy of the universe you believe in. God is inside of us. It's all around us. You know, it's everywhere. It's this omnipresent thing, but not in a boring kind of all powerful, perfect way, but in a really fascinating, like, you know, the dead are as human as the alive kind of way. And we are all susceptible to all these weird whimsies and complications that is being human, even if we're on the spiritual plane, you know? So I think that's how you get like Carlos sitting next to Riley, who's dead, and they're drinking together, you know what I mean? And like talking shit and being confused together and trying to work through situations, you know, that's really about friendship. And for us, for Santeros, you know, like we interact in a very conversatory way with spirit. So when we're handling, you know, ancestor, we call Egun, you know, we'll smoke a cigar with them and hang out and pour some rum for them and pour some rum for me, and then talk it out. You know what I mean? In the sense of having a spiritual conversation. That's a level of spirituality that I don't think I don't see enough in literature. You know what I mean? It's usually either like this, oh, majestic angel, demon, whatever, God, or it's like, you know, nothing. You know what I mean? And it's like, I mean, I think you do, like Max Gladstone is amazing. N.K. Jemisin does really interesting stuff. They both do a lot of cool stuff with like gods walking around and being human. And there's other stuff, definitely. But from a spiritual point of view, that was something I really wanted to invest in and like think about deeply, is like the idea of spirit in terms of being conversatory and inspiration, you know, all these things. And back to Shadowshaper, that piece about art and spirit being connected, you know, is so huge.
And one thing I liked about, and I will, actually, I'm gonna do a write up on Shadowshaper because I was reading it to my daughter, who looks like the cover.
She's so beautiful, man. Your daughter is.
Thank you, man.
She's fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so I'm trying to go through with her.
Yes.
What's up? Oh yeah, man, dude. Like,
Yeah.
She's already seen Goonies and Gremlins and shit. Like, I don't care. You know, I'm like, I expose her to whatever.
Right.
You know, but Shadowshaper, there's something about it. I mean, I guess I'll just link Shadowshaper. I mean, they take Shadowshaper and Half-Ressurection takes place in the same world, right? Yeah.
Yes.
But there's just something that I think I'll appreciate about your writing is that your spirituality is messy.
Yes.
And not as an insult. Don't take it as a pejorative, but it's not like it's not like it's the difference between, like, say, multiculturalism, which is about objectifying and like taxonomy, whereas where you have Fernando Ortiz in 1940s Cuba talking about transculturalism as being a messy and smashing and war and tobacco and sugar, and it sucks and it's hard and it's painful, but this is how it works. And so your spirituality feels like that to me in your writing.
Right. Oh, that's when I was like I don't know, younger, and that's an amazing book, and his work is like mind-blowing sometimes. But yeah, it is messy. Spirituality is a messy thing. It's not a simple thing, in a large part because humans are messy, you know. And I think that's what's great about it. Like, I think there's a part of it that's very human, and that's what I'm attracted to. And then it's a crossroads, right? Because there's a part of it that's very divine. And when we start to really like function on a spiritual, you know, like in a spiritual dialogue, those two things come together in really fascinating ways. And if you look at the Greek gods or the Orishas or lots of other different spiritualities that happen throughout, you know, the universe, like it's a messy kind of world. Even the divinity is messy. And sometimes that reflects our, you know, messy human, the messy kind of in our messy relationship to things are in play when you start getting in that spiritual conversation. And I find that to be both beautiful and true, and also very ripe for literature. Like, to talk about divine crossroads of humanity and God, like, woo! You know? So I love writing that, and then again to throw in art. Like, here we are having a conversation, you know, whether it be with music or with paint or with words, you know, with this element that's bigger than us. So even if you don't subscribe to any spiritual system and you're creating art, you are in conversation with the universe. You're in dialogue with people that came before you and people that will come after you, you know, and the world around you and energy. Like, you know, you might not want to call it all those things, but that's what's going on, you know, and like, and I think that's great, you know, and I think it should be a conversation and not a monologue and not like a, you know, I don't take dictation. There's a dialogue.
And there's something I think is really important about that as well. Be understanding that writing itself, even though it's a solitary act, it is a conversation.
Yes.
And understanding sometimes you got to shut up and let the other person have their say.
Right. And you're bringing in elements from your whole life. You know what I mean? Like as much as I subscribe to read a lot as a writer, you also need to live a lot as a writer. You can't stop living. And I draw, I would say, equal parts from shit I've read and shit I've lived. Especially because I particularly love the vernacular and the poetic vernacular form of writing. I take a lot of inspiration from conversations, you know, be it on the street corner, in the ambulance, you know, with people I care about, whatever, like, you know, gossip, like those are all forms of storytelling. We're always telling stories. And I was talking the other day about how characters sometimes will just start telling a story and run, and I won't be able to like catch up with them because like I can't, they just, my characters love to tell stories. And, you know, sometimes I have to make room in the plot to allow them to sometimes, because that's who we are. You know, that's what we do. We talk, we get excited, we get into it, and boom. And then it's like, all right, but can you make that work in the overall narrative? Because you know, you got to keep things moving forward. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's beautiful. Like, I think we're supposed to write about falling in love, right, and having our heart broken and all these other things. And like, that's not an experience that you can actually really fully get from reading a book.
No, and on that same note, first of all, I also too want to really congratulate you on your marriage, because I really think that having a public declaration of love is one of the most revolutionary acts you can do.
Amen.
And I want to appreciate that. I'm going to appreciate you for that. And also too, you know, you married a yardie, so you know what I'm saying, that's dope. That's dope for me. That feels good in my heart. But how, and this is probably be one of the silly questions that you haven't heard before, but how is your union? How do you think your union, especially with the whole other cultural sensibility into your life, whether it's diet, music, rhythm, and dance, or whatever? How do you think that's going to shape your writing going forward? If that, you know.
Oh man, that's an interesting question. I've never gotten that question. That's deep. I don't know. You know, I'm really. I'll say this. I'm really excited to find out. Mostly because, especially, I would say, for a lot of reasons. But Nastassian is like just such a brilliant individual, like human being. Like I just feel like every time we talk, she's feeding me. You know what I mean? Like we're feeding each other really on a spiritual and a like intellectual level. She's hysterical. Like she's funnier than and I think I'm funny. So, like, you know, like I just learn a lot from her and from her outlook and everything else. She's just sharp as a knife, as a machete, really. And like, you know, so like talking to her, I grow, you know, every time I talk to her. And I talk to her probably like, you know, more hours than not in a day, as long, you know, like we talk all day. We're on Skype constantly because she's not here yet. So like, you know, and I still just grow every time. So I just, you know, I just see that as like making my art better. I don't know how yet, but I know it will. That I know, you know.
Sorry, ladies and eager gentlemen and people in between. He is married. I'm sorry. I must. Sorry to hurt everybody out there. I know y'all was probably waiting. Like, well, what are he gonna say about his status? Sorry.
They'll be all right. They'll be all right. That special someone is out there for it, or someone.
Everybody got somebody.
Hey.
I mean, if my wife could marry my ugly ass, there's somebody out there for everybody.
About yourself. That is no. I reject that premise entirely. You tried it.
Oh man. So is there any other type of stuff that you've been interested in doing? I mean, like maybe like space opera, maybe possibly superheroics, possibly, I don't know. I guess like the funny part is there's no one really to compare your stuff to. The only person even slightly in my mind that I'm kind of seeing even remote parallel is Brian Lumley. The Necroscope series. It's dope. Like the first 3 books are just like, it's like vampires, but it's not like sparkly Abercrombie and Fitch vampires. You know, this is like straight up like, I can transform and get inside you. There's a bug inside me. There's a wormhole to Russia and in the Carpathian Mountains somewhere where the damn vampires were actually born from a dimensional rift. One guy is a Henry Keogh or Keogh, however you pronounce it, is a dude who can actually draw undead people's skills to enhance his own. Like it's a bugged out book. Like it's like there's a gang of them. But there's something. I mean, I'm thinking about like how would your sensibilities and your passions play out and say like a space opera? Like how does race and place play out when Earth is no longer central?
That's a great question. Well, I do have a middle grade science fiction post flood apocalypse adventure story that's kind of making the rounds right now with publishers. And that is sci-fi. That's definitely pure sci-fi. Well, I guess there's fantasy elements because there's like monsters and magic. But basically, it's the last city on Earth after the floods have covered over the entire planet. And it's just buildings that have kind of smashed together into this one island of a city where there aren't even streets because it's all just jagged edges. So people have to fly around on little jet boots. And it's about the kids that live in that city trying to survive, basically. And there's like iguana creatures and weird little aliens and then giant overlords and all kinds of shit. So I'm really excited about that. It's kind of about Katrina and it's kind of about Cuba and it's about, you know, this idea of being left behind and trapped and still having pride in where you're from and where you're about, what you're about, all these different things. So I love that story, you know, because it's also just, those are kind of the subtext, but it's really just like this adventure more so than anything else I've written. It's just like kids running around trying to survive, you know, fighting off the bad guys and aliens and monsters and whatever. So yeah, that's making its round. And it was fun for me to write just sci-fi and just fun. Beyond that, I have a book that's really more, I guess, you know, these terms are fucked up, but kind of on the literary scope of things in the sense that, and I use that, I guess, to say that it's not, I don't consider it a genre book. It's not really, it's, there's a lot of story there, but it's also very like no one's trying to solve a mystery. You know, no one's trying to stop a bad guy from taking over the world. It's much more like this dude in New Jersey who's a security guard at a hospital, and the spirit that watches over him, who is his aunt who disappeared during the Cuban Revolution. So that's like a much different kind of approach to the page, even though there's still spirits, you know, and whatever. So I had to do edits on it and send it back out, basically. So yeah, I mean, I love trying different things. I have a graphic novel in the works. I have stuff, you know, like that I'm kind of just like got my hands in different pots. And so we will see. But I will say that I think way down the line one day, I'm guessing there will be an epic fantasy potentially type thing. Although I feel like I'm writing one right now in the sense that while the Bone Street Roomba is technically an urban fantasy, and definitely book 1 and 2 are both fully urban fantasy. Book 3, which I'm in the middle, literally in the middle of, really feels like an epic fantasy war novel taken out of Westeros or whatever, Middle Earth, and replanted in Brooklyn. That's really my approach to it, because I love books like that. I love epic fantasy, some epic fantasy, and I kind of want to bring that, like all the different points of view and the colliding kind of political consciousnesses and the actual colliding armies and all that stuff. Like, I just want to bring that here and see what happens. So it's almost like a remix.
I mean, and what better place to have, you know, an epic fantasy is Brooklyn. Like, what better place?
But exactly.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
we are going to launch from BAM. We're launching from BAM. This is our staging ground.
I haven't decided where the staging ground is going to be yet, but it might be BAM. I'm just saying, like, I mean, I think there's a very clear lineage in urban fantasy that goes back to noir, you know, and I love noir. And Half-Ressurection is fully noir.
Absolutely.
But I also think, like, what happens if we shift with that, if we play with that lineage, you know what I mean? So we set it here, but we take some of the ideas like multiple POVs and do it here, you know, or like, you know, like these, I love these like vast political empires and networks that happen in, like, you know, Game of Thrones. So, like, that's fascinating. That's really deep shit, I think, when it's done right, you know, and I think Martin does it right.
And not a rehash of fairy courts and the she, and it's like, are you really serious? Right. If you're not Emma Bull or approaching War for the Oaks level, you might just want to try. I mean, like, and not to be a dick, but it's like, I can't read the same book about somebody riding a dragonfly or riding a something or some city. I mean, like, it's just like, come on, like,
right.
The West doesn't have to be the focus all the time.
Thank you. Yes. And that's absolutely true. And that, you know, brings us to the power of the counter narrative, you know, and the power of, I would also just throw in there the power of remixing shit and really trying to, like, see what happens when we throw in different elements like that, whether it's just complicating the idea of what's urban fantasy and what's epic fantasy, or I think too, I love the idea of playing with multiple points of view. I did that with Midnight Taxi Tango, which comes out in January. It's a sequel to Half-Ressurection. That's told from Carlos, from Kia, who's the girl that works at the Botanica, and from another character you haven't met yet called Reza. Their 3 points of view kind of go back and forth. And, like, to tell a story that way was so much fun for me. And it really shakes up that whole sort of, like, lone wolf, you know, boring, let's be honest, kind of like dude, and that vision of masculinity that noir is really about, which is that individual, that rugged individual. You know what I mean? And as much as I love noir, I think it's exciting to kind of push past that, but still, you know, give homage to the cool parts about noir.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the noir bones with a different flesh.
Exactly.
And I think it's really important. I mean, I think there's something also, too, about just the idea of the lone wolf or the sidekick that's so wrapped up into, like, white male expansionist power. You know, there's something that is about, like, I'm the guy, or, hey, sidekick, I have a death. I have an extra life right here, like Frogger. Take this one first, then I'll be able to, you know, I mean, there's something about that, but there's something when you start seeing, even, like, you know, I remember, like, I've read, I was an early reader, pretty bright kid, whatever. And I remember seeing, reading, what was it I saw? Oh, the Dragonlance series. From Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, if you remember that from a long time ago.
No.
Oh, it was just like, it's the Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it doesn't hold up now, but back then it was like my entire world. But even though there were companions, they still kind of acted alone in a lot of different ways. But I think stuff that you do, stuff that I really saw in the Street Lethal series by Stephen Barnes. Other things like the idea of actually having companions really work together in a way of in a collective, because even Lord of the Rings is a bunch of individuals who just happen to be going the same direction.
Right.
So when you have people actually doing it, it's like that's such a mind fuck in a lot of different ways, because you don't see that in this genre stuff.
That's true. That's deep. Have you read Salsa, Nocturna?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So that really makes me think about the Carlos Riley relationship. I thought of it in those terms exactly, but when you're saying it, it's like, you know, there's that moment where they're confronted with this plantation master ghost that they're not supposed to kill, because the council is like, no, like that's a protected entity, right? You're not, you know, just handle it some other way. And Carlos, and you know, and he's threatening them, and Carlos hesitates, and Riley just goes in and, spoiler alert, you know, makes him kill. And then they have to go their separate ways, right? Because that's this turning point in their friendship where one of them they both took an action, basically. You know, one of the actions was inaction, and then it's like, how does that affect them? But all that to say, I guess, is that they are really separate entities. You know, they are really like, they're friends, and they're basically at that point on equal footing, and neither of them is there to be cannon fodder, which is really what happens to most sidekicks, especially of color. And so it's like, you know, and then I just think friendship is such a fascinating and beautiful kind of just thing. I don't know, for lack of a better word, like friendship is amazing, right? And again, like, is that something we really deal with a lot in literature? Yes, but also I just feel there's so much more room to get deeper into it, like what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, whereas we could just have sidekicks, and that could be good for an emotional punch in the gut when they get killed, and then become a motivation, I guess, to revenge them or whatever. Like, that's played out.
It's going to be the woman who dies, and the guy has to avenge her.
Right. Get the fuck out. Cut that shit out. Like, that's just old. Like, I'm not saying, you know, like, no one should ever die or nothing, but like, come on. Like, we just seen that so many times. And so again, like, I think that without knowing it or meaning to, I also kind of ended up, Carlos's arc is always towards community. And that's not something that I really realized until I started writing him and looked at Salsa Nocturna from the whole, like, I stepped back and was like, oh, wow. He always starts out in this one singular spot, and then just people just kind of come around him, and they're living and they're dead and they're complicated and they disagree. But he just attracts people and just people kind of culminate in general. And he always ends up like this, you know, not the center even, but just amidst the crowd of other, you know, like-minded motherfuckers. That's true in Half-Ressurection, which starts with him just having this one-off, you know, with Trevor in the park, one-off in the sense of, you know, whatever. And then, you know, ends with him just surrounded by love, you know, by all these different characters that really care about him on different levels.
Missing from most books is that, especially for men, being able to tackle every type of level of love unapologetically, not just sexualize it, not just genderize it, but what is it? What is this love between me and you know, the council, or lack thereof? Me and my boys over here. What does that mean? Me and the Botanica. What does that actually mean? A love of place, love of people in the place. What does that mean? Is without saying, hey, here's my dick. How you doing?
Right. which is again boring. Like, we've seen that so many times, but you know, and that's another reason that Kia really, besides Kia took over the page, right? Like, like I was a character that I wrote just being like, oh, I need a teenager to work at the desk, so let me just create one real quick. And then Kia was like, no, actually, motherfucker, let me just stand back for a second. Let me just have a chat with Carlos right now. You know, blah, 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 all this shit. I was like, oh, okay. All right, sister, you do your thing. You know what I mean? So she took over. And then I had to write more stories with her because I love that character. Like, in my heart, I love that character. And her voice just came through so clearly. I couldn't help but write more. But also, I think, like, you know, I think it's really important for there to be stories where there are, you know, grown people and teenage people relating to each other as friends and having each other's back and not having sex and just being, you know, human with each other and complicated. And that's something I really wanted to have. I wanted Carlos to have a friend who was alive, you know, who we could learn things from. There's a moment in Midnight Taxi Tango where he's watching her. He comes up on her in the park while she's hanging out with one of her friends, one of her best friends. and they're just, you know, like Kia and her friend are just carrying on and like being playful with each other and fighting and all this shit. And he's just looking at them like, wow, people touch each other. Like you know, he's dead. He's half dead, so his skin is cold. So he's not trying to have that much physical contact with people. And he's just looking at these two like happy teenage girls just being loving with each other and being like, wow, like physical touch. Like I'm so like out. Like he's so out of that world in some ways. But still, he still finds a way to, you know, be surrounded by love in different ways. And, you know, I think that's a powerful thing. Like we need to think about all those things.
I mean, you think about that, you're thinking about, I mean, I think the intergenerational thing is so important, especially for people of color, because there's a, I think it was the New Yorker, I can't remember, there's an old saying that was like, you know, old men for counsel, young for war. And like, you know, and I'm finding myself, you know, I'll be 43 this year, and I'm like, oh, I'm moving up into counsel age. So what does that mean for my art?
Right.
What's the legacy I'm gonna have to leave? Because when I was young, I wrote a book called Big Black Penis because I was a fucking asshole and wanted to be, and I was mad. I was like, I'm gonna be offensive as possible. You know, people use it. I mean, people are using it in college courses or whatever. I hate the book now, but back then I was like, I'm writing a book called Big Black Penis, and I did. But now I'm like, yeah, it's like, yeah, really, like, you know, like. But then now it's kind of like I'm in this age where my voice matters.
Yeah.
And you know, so how will age and being a father and the rest, how is that going to temper my art to the point where my daughter goes, that's my legacy, and she's not ashamed of it.
Right.
But then two, and I teach university and I'm a director of a high school. So when I have them read my stuff, like, what am I leaving for the people behind me? The older I get, and that's kind of where my mind is going. Like,
I feel you, and here's another reason why, you know, my wife is a genius. Because last week I was struggling because I realized I had two really important essays that I really wanted to nail coming up as deadlines. Not even coming up, like in the next couple of months, really. But I was just like, I was thinking about them and I didn't know where they were going to go. Anyway, she was like, look, just think about, our kids one day reading it. Like that's where your mind should be, because that's the truth. That's what's going to happen. And I just crumbled. Like I was just like, but in a good way, you know. I was like, that's so. And it was funny because my mind had already been starting to go in that direction. Like maybe I could put it like a letter somehow, whatever. But when she said that, I was just like, oh. And then she was like, you know, that's kind of how you should be thinking about everything these days. And I was like, oh. You know, she's not pregnant, mind you. She's not pregnant. I know Jamaican Twitter is taking bets and everything else or whatever, but she's not pregnant. Like you said, like that's real though. I mean, I think as we become men in different ways in society and as we grow up, really anyone, of course, like these things change as we think about what's our legacy and who are we speaking to. But yeah, absolutely. And that's also why I teach. You know what I mean? Like besides that, teaching pays quicker than publishing. I don't know if it pays better, but it definitely pays quicker. So, yes. You know, there's that. But like really, like the program that I'm doing, I don't know if you've seen the write-up, but the Shape Your Shadow program, you know, with those girls.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, Hercules. I was like, that shit is incredible.
Did you see me talking on Twitter about what I did with them with the contracts?
Yes.
Listen. That needs to be everywhere, because I mean, not me saying it, but just the contract piece. Like when we're teaching kids how to write, and we're not really telling them about what it's about to be a writer, whether that. And I'm not saying like even take them to business school. I'm just saying like we as writers who teach kids have to be real about the reality of what they're going to go through when they become writers. You know, whether it's fucked up contracts or a fucked up white supremacist industry or what have you. You know, like give them the armor and the tools and everything there, not just the craft, because let's be honest, for writers of color, we need to survive in that world. So that's why I did that whole thing with the contracts with this to be done. But to go back to what we were saying, like that shit has been so inspiring because those girls are so smart and brilliant, and they have so many questions, man. Like I've taught rooms full of adults, literally like auditoriums, and I'll speak for an hour, and then I'll be like, "Do y'all have questions?" And they're like, "Nope." And I'm like, motherfucker, I know I said something that challenged you. Like, I know that I did. It's not me being arrogant. I'm positive that I said something that you thought about and had wanted to know more about, but you don't want to ask me. These girls, I couldn't even start the class because they had so many questions before I even got started. And I was in heaven. I was just like, this is fantastic. Like, they are just such invested and curious, minds. They're doing great work. They've already sent me some stories. The stories are going to go up on the website, and they're just doing like brilliant work.
And I don't want to keep me too long because I know it's 10 o'clock in New York and I'm in California right now, even though I'm missing Brooklyn bad right now. But I just don't but you gave them the space, and especially in science fiction, fantasy, horror, I don't know, whatever umbrella term you want to put it under. When will a girl of color ever have space to build and create and to play with that clay of the fantastic?
Man. And it's not like they're not out there like consuming that medium. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, anime. Let's talk about anime.
Oh, really?
I'm not an expert, but girls of color, kids of color love anime. Like, they're eating it up, and it's so exciting because now it's like on Netflix, and they all know more about it than anyone I've ever met. They have the Bible like of anime down pat, and they're just like, no, watch this one, no, watch that one, no, season 18 of that one got really bad. You know what I mean? Like, they have this, like, they already. So it's that, and when I tell you that they're sending me stories, those are stories they had already written, but they didn't have anything to do with it. You know what I'm saying? This one girl sent me a story about from the point of view of a black android male that the government created and then sent to kill his parents. I know.
Word?
I just want to cry at the very premise. Like, this girl's 16.
I'm like, which one of you fucking idiots are gonna buy the movie rights to this girl and make her rich? Like, which
man, listen, and it's well written like a motherfucker. Listen, I'm just sitting here like, oh God. I mean, and that's the other piece is like they already have the politics down pat. You know what I mean? Like we got assholes out here in the world that are adults pretending that science fiction isn't political. And I just want to be like, the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? Of course, sci-fi and fantasy have always been political. What level of self-delusion are you on that you can't even grasp what a 16-year-old, knows inherently without anyone having ever sat down to teach her? You know what I'm saying? Like, you cannot not be political in this field. You have failed if you believe that. And even if you're not out there being political, someone's going to politicize it.
Absolutely.
So, wake the fuck up, really. And then, but then I'm getting these stories, and then I gotta be honest with you, all that stuff it just fades. Like, all the bullshit that I watch happen online and the trolling and the garbage with whatever gate and everything else. Like, when I feel like this is the medicine. You know what I mean? Like, working with kids and doing my own work, like, that is the medicine. And having conversations like this, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we can ignore it necessarily, and I think there is a need to really address certain things. And obviously, I think that because I do that with my essays. But I feel like the primary thrust and focus of what we're here to do is like teach the children and connect with each other and do the good work and move the fuck forward, because we are the future.
And the future is now in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
I mean, I look at my daughter, and one day we're chilling, and next thing you know, she's trying to talk to me in Tagalog, and I'm like, yo, that's your mom. Like, go over there. I don't know what you're saying. I have no idea what you're saying. Can you go talk to your mom, please? And it's like the accelerator factor, right? Like, I was born, I remember seeing the first ATM put in my neighborhood. It was like, oh my God, money from a wall. My daughter, my daughter saw a phone. It was like, Daddy, it's not a phone. It doesn't even have an Apple on it. It's kind of like, damn, that's your reference? Your reference is touched in this and that. And so her mind is already accelerated. And I think also, too, what you're talking about these young girls you work with is that we don't restrict by geography, by culture, because those are actually trampolines. They're not shackles.
Right.
And this is how you want to, this is, the world's yours. This is big as hell.
That's it, man.
I'm going to leave you with the one last question, sir. So if you could take any literary come on, son. If you could play in any literary sandbox any character, any world, and make it your own for one novel, which character and or literary sandbox would you play in?
I hate you. I feel like I know the answer, but I can't remember it. Like, I feel like I've had this thought. Shit.
He's like, I fuck Popeye up, son.
Oh, well, let me do a shout out while I'm thinking. Because oh, God, I lost his name. Kai Ashanti Wilson. Do you know him?
No, I do not.
Okay, check his shit out. He has a story on tour that's really badass that's up right now. I forget what it's called. It's great. But more importantly, well, I don't want to say more importantly, but the piece that I want to talk about real quick is just a novella he has coming out called The Sorcerer at Wild Eeps. Mm-hmm. It hasn't come out yet. It's coming out from Tor. You know, Tor.com has a novella imprint that they just started up. So this is one of them. I think the announcement's out already. I'm not sure when it comes out. It's coming in the next couple months. It is badass. When I tell you that they sent it to me, the blurb, and I literally wrote in the blurb that this is the literary baby of William Shakespeare, James Baldwin, George R.R. Martin, and Ghostface Killer.
Oh,
that's like literally what it is. Like, I wrote that down, and that's what the shit is. It is so good. It is like insane. Anyway,
one more time, so when we post this, people can get the name right.
Yeah, it's called The Sorcerer at Wild Eeps. The guy's name is Kai Ashanti Wilson. He's a motherfucker of a writer. Bless him. Okay, let me answer your question. Ooh. Do you remember that game Castlevania?
Of course.
All right, that's what I would do. I would be. Castlevania.
Castlevania.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man. I'm going to answer the question, too, because fuck it.
Yeah, please.
If I could get the rights to the old school TV show, The Wild Wild West,
ooh,
I have the dopest story. Oh, my God. I have the dopest story set in that world, in that type of Secret Service, and that. Oh, my God. If I could do The Wild Wild West, it'd be on and cracking.
I'm going to need you to do that now.
That's like one of my favorite shows of all time, dude. Best stunt fights on there, best stunts.
Really?
I mean, that shit's just dope.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think like if I've seen a full episode. I'm pretty sure I've seen bits and pieces here and there, but I don't think I've ever watched a full episode.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check it out.
So, brother, thank you so much. I know you're busy. Thank you, man. I'm gonna clean this up. I'm gonna post it. I appreciate it, dude. Yeah, like I said, you come to the Bay. You and your wife got a place to stay. You know that.
We are coming to the Bay. I don't know when, but I just finished reading. By the way, let me shout this out too. I just finished reading Little Brother by Cory Doctorow.
Oh, Cory Doctorow. That book is a beast.
I love that
book. Is a beast.
Oh, I love that book. I was so happy. First of all, it's so exciting. Like on just a gut level, it's an exciting fucking book. Like it's literally a page turner, and that's rare. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty hard to impress with as far as the excitement factor goes. I tend towards more easily bored than not, which is whatever. Probably a good thing for a writer, but it's dangerous. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yo, that book is fantastic. Like deep ass, just conversation and analysis about subversion and everything. Oh my God!
And the main character though, is grappling with what whiteness actually means in a way that you don't see.
Yes, I said that on Twitter today.
Oh, word?
I did. I literally said that on Twitter. I was like, I can think of that. No, seriously. I said it. I was like, I can think of that book. One other, All Are Pretty Songs by Sarah McCarry, which is a phenomenal book.
It's a book is dope.
Phenomenal. That's another book where the main character is white, but has to think about the fact that they're white and that it matters and means something in the world. But like, especially when we're thinking about young adult literature, how many books can we really say do that? Like, that's a conversation.
Well, how many books are brave enough to talk about subversion and rebellion in a digital age with teenagers in a way like that that's not patronizing?
Right. That's real too. That's real too. But I'm saying for all the books that there fucking are about white people, why is it that only 2 of them actually speak about what it means to be white?
That's damn.
Let's end on that note.
Okay, brother. Thank you. Have a good night. I appreciate you.
I love you, man. I'm so glad we got to speak.
All right.
All right. We'll talk again soon. Later.
All right. Later.